The task of theology. What is the task of theology? Now, this is a funny word to use. When you study theology and you read whether textbooks or you read overviews, or even if you listen to other YouTube channels, I think the Master's Seminary, when you go through theology, all of their Theology 1 courses that are on the Master's Seminary, they all ask the question of what is the task of theology. And when this comes up, I have to ask the question, what do you mean by task? Is it supposed to do something? Is it the task of theology, or is it the task of the theologian that you're talking about? What exactly do you mean by task? And again, does theology itself perform something, or are we referring to something that theology leads us into? Often the answer is that the task of theology is that it helps us understand the Bible. Now, that can be true, but if you want to understand the Bible, read the Bible. It's not a matter of if you get better theology, if you go through theology courses, you're going to now understand the Bible. You understand the Bible by reading it. So what exactly is being said there? And I don't want to jump to conclusions. It just seems suspect to me to throw that out there as the quick answer. It could be that it's just the easy answer. I don't know, but the task of theology. Theology should not be about self, but about others. We could use theology to teach to the next generation, or even to those who themselves are not theologians, meaning scholarly. They don't know where to even begin. They haven't wrestled these issues. They don't know the deep well that is within theology. They can read their Bibles and they can learn to understand their Bibles, but as far as the difficulties within these different theology, I don't even know how to word it, but for anybody who's studied theology at a significant time, you'll understand that sometimes things don't piece together very well, and they seem to be contradictory in theology. And so we could use theology to teach the next generation and to teach those who themselves are not theologians in that sort of scholarly way. And especially considering that we are officially past the 500-year mark on the Protestant Reformation. I mean, we of all people should not be withholding such knowledge of God and His nature to the people. That was the whole point of the Protestant Reformation. They wanted to make the Bible something that anybody could read. They wanted to make God known to the people, to the common people. And if the problem is that you need a reason for people to come to church, then maybe you should try to pour it out upon them. Maybe that's the reason people don't want to come to church, is because you're withholding from them. If it's a matter of, again, if the problem is we need to give a task for theology so that people will come to our seminaries, because if we don't tell them this is what you get out of theology, then they're not going to ask the question of, well, I guess they will ask the question of, why do I need theology? And they might not consider. But look, when you start to pour it out, people start to get interested. And as they continue to get interested, you're going to find more people coming into, whether it's your church or your seminary or whatever. And it's not going to be a question of, well, what's the reason for studying theology? What's the task? What's the necessity, etc. It's just going to be obvious. Now, what I want to give is a question of something that might be a little less obvious. While passing it on might be the task of the theologian, is it truly the task of theology? I want to say the task of theology is to understand that we have touched heaven, and that through the Messiah we have been brought into a reality that is tangible. Okay? Christian theology is not based upon philosophy, it's based upon truth. It's not a matter of debating philosophically how these things work together. It's about coming to the understanding of what it is that we ourselves are in the midst of. Those two should not be coined against each other, I agree. And yet, the stereotype of the theologian exists. And I think we all know what that means. We've often been denied the authentic thing for discussion of the authentic thing, as if the discussion of the authentic thing is the authentic thing. And that's not how this works. The keys to the kingdom have been received and have been put away into a small box, a small metal box, somewhere, probably hidden in the Vatican. A church father probably ate the key to the metal box, and now 1,500 years later, we're still trying to figure out how to open the box. And this is tongue-in-cheek. It's not national treasure. The study of theology, it's not like national treasure, as if we can study the works of our church fathers to figure out what the true authentic faith looks like. As believers, we have fellowship with these realities. Fellowship and not relatedness. Understand the difference. It's not that we're related to them because we've learned about them or something. The task of theology is the imperative participation in those real, tangible things that we call doctrines. Again, salvation's the easy one for me to go to, because if you're a theologian, you want to say, well, I am saved. But what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you explain that? And you can go, well, here is theologically how you explain. Or you can say, well, I used to be this, and then such and such took place, and here's the story. And here's how it comes all the way to today, that I know it's still happening because these things are still happening in my life. Do you see the two different veins here? The task of theology is to explain the imperative participation in these things, these real, tangible things that we call doctrines. Okay? So we are looking to explain them. We're looking, first of all, to experience and to be a part of and in the midst of these things. And secondly, we are looking to explain it. We aren't interested in, quote, sound doctrine, nor in, quote, truth. Because both of these can become trite truism. Both of these things can become just catchwords. We're interested in the thing itself, in eternity expressed through flesh and blood. We're looking to be those people that when somebody asks the question of what is the Trinity, you can point to your congregation and say, do you see the way they love one another? Do you see the way that they are one with one another? That you can't tell where this person ends and the other one begins because they're so united with one another. And they have all things in common. They share all things. And when you look at this community of people, there's such communion among them. That's like the Trinity. God's like that. That's the point of theology. That's the task of theology. If our theology is about piecing together various themes and making them work cohesively, then we've missed the mark abysmally. I mean, that's a low standard. You can do that with almost any system of theology. Every denomination has their pet doctrine, and we shouldn't be surprised. That's the wisdom of the principalities and powers. We've been stuck in the elementary principles, a Pauline phrase tied to the principalities, that they might rule over and usurp even religious man, keeping him bound to immaturity and tradition. This is just who we are. This is what we are. These elementary principles, these how does Paul word it in Galatians? These stewards, these guardians, if you will, who have been looking over the Son until he would come into an age where he can become an heir. And he's no longer a child who needs a guardian over him. This is exactly what we are. If I were to just assess the American church, using that term loosely, that's exactly what we are. We are a people who are bound to our traditions and to our elementary principles. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look up that phrase. It comes up in Colossians and I think in a few other places. We quibble over these things, meaning doctrines. We quibble over the various doctrines while the powers of darkness brood over our cities and nations. These things we've devoted ourselves to, these doctrines we've devoted ourselves to, which are only shadows of the things of Christ. Ultimately meaning that we're discussing the discussion of God, and not finding the substance in Christ. These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom in self-imposed religion, false humility, and neglect of the body. Now, this is a harsh thing for me to say. I get it. We rob ourselves of our own humanity through depravity-focused theology. In dehumanizing self, we don't even get to enjoy the benefits of redemption. The thing the angels desire to look into, we forfeit, even after tasting of the heavenly gift, simply because we want to banter over the spiritual milk, calling it meat, and never realizing our own immaturity. Because of their own unbelief, many will now suffer to watch others enter in before them. What am I talking about? Again, I know I'm being harsh. I get it. But is it true? When you read Hebrews 5 and 6 and you find Paul said, or I guess whoever wrote Hebrews says, these things are milk, and I want to move past that. How many of those things are what you preach on every Sunday? How many of those things are the things you debate? How many of those things are the things that we focus on week after week after week after week? And if it's milk, or if it's not even milk, if it's like before milk, pre-milk, and we're calling this meat. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Instead of finding fullness and coming into that Melchizedek priesthood, where we are under a new covenant, free from the bondage of such elementary principles, found in a fellowship with God in the holiest place, perpetuating the faith of all the saints and greats of all generations, overcoming to a place where the world was not worthy, no longer standing before Sinai, but now coming unto Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and ecclesia of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood sprinkled that speaks better things than the blood of Abel. We must wait for the redemption of all things, for which the creation currently moans and groans, because we've reduced being human into being beasts or even creatures. We think humanity is what is after the fall. But God did not create us for this. He created us to live in communion with Him. The task of theology is to live in that communion. The glory of the book of Acts is at best a quandary to us, and at worst something marked down as only for that generation. The task of theology is to take us past the mumbo-jumbo and into the real. Our biggest concern in theology should be that we do not take the part and make it stand for the whole. God has revealed Himself, and let us also do likewise. Let us not take the wisdom of the world and the way we perceive and think, and then apply it to God or the Bible, as if God's thoughts are indeed like our thoughts. Let us be a people where our sole focus is that we would get at the heart of what it is that God has expressed from the beginning, as He would say in Isaiah, telling the end from the beginning. It's not like God has not expressed this to us. It's not like He's not made it known. It's not like we are without excuse. For those who continue to leave theology at a place where it's just a matter of debate and banter, again, at best, I mean, this is an enigma to me. It's a serious thing. If the task of theology is to bring us into the real, tangible thing, it's no longer just something we study, it's something we are living. If that's true, then we need, in all ways, in every way possible, we need to allow theology to be what it actually is then, and stop reducing it down to something that we just study. Let it be the living thing it is. So with that, I bless you, and I ask that the Lord would continue to stir our hearts and continue to create in us a zeal that we might be able to pursue God, to come to know Him and to be like Him. Thank you for listening. Grace and peace to you in Christ.